Order. Order. I'm calling Eugenie Sage.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, and thank you. Pleased to take a call on behalf of the Green Party on the Local Government Act 2002 Amendment Bill number 3. From anyone listening to Minister Williamson's speech, I'll start again, Mr Speaker. Anyone listening to the Minister's speech would assume that the bill was about making local government more productive, more consultative and more efficient. And certainly there are some changes in this bill to the Principal Act which could do that by broadening the scope of the triennial agreement. That may encourage more collaboration between councils and more shared services. Things like infrastructure strategies are also a sensible idea. But there are 4 major reasons why the Green Party is opposing this bill. Firstly, it's because it represents another attack by National on local democracy and competent councils. Secondly, by changing the consultation requirements around significance and around long-term plans, the bill potentially reduces the community's ability to participate in important council decisions. By making consultation more flexible, there's potentially less consultation. Thirdly, just as the government is privatising our energy companies and Air New Zealand, public assets which have been built up over generations, this bill encourages councils to consider privatising council services and community infrastructure. And finally, the changes to development contributions will benefit property developers and subdividers at the expense of ratepayers. So dealing with each of these issues in turn, the National Government is promoting major ad hoc change to the structure and organisation of local government throughout New Zealand without any clear purpose except its mistaken view that somehow bigger local government is better. This bill, together with the changes last year to the Local Government Act, will allow the Auckland Unitary Council model with its big super council and weak local boards to be rolled out elsewhere in New Zealand. And it's another example of this government centralising power. More power being concentrated in the executive, more power being given to ministers to intervene and interfere. And this bill extinguishes, potentially, many of our competent city and district councils and centralises power at the regional level in unitary councils and replaces those competent councils with local boards. That's because the bill allows the Local Government Commission in any proposed reorganisation to axe city and district councils, which represent their communities, and replace them with local boards. It's part of the brave new world of super councils and big new unitary councils. Because at the moment, the Principal Act only allows these local boards to be established when unitary councils are established in metropolitan areas with a population of over 400,000. The bill removes that provision. And we've seen, Mr Speaker, in Hawke's Bay, where the Local Government Commission has come out with its massive proposal for reorganisation. There, we would see 44, a major loss of democracy with I think it's 59 elected councillors and mayor replaced by just 9 councillors, 1 mayor and a clutch of boards. And of course we have seen the mayors of Central Hawke's Bay, Wairoa and Napier opposing this proposal because of the attack on democracy it represents by substituting these local boards for competent councils. And there's a very fundamental difference between the role of boards and those of councils. The board's role is to identify and communicate the interests and preferences of people in their board area to the unitary authority. Boards have no power to rate, no power to make bylaws. They have the power to recommend, but they lack the decision-making power that councils have to make decisions on behalf of their communities. So that's why we see this bill in combination with the changes to the Local Government Act, which required 10% of the community to sign a petition in order to get a poll on a reorganisation proposal, as an attack on democracy. Because National wants less democratic council structures, it wants to make it more difficult for the community to take part in decisions by their councils and in these reorganisation proposals. This provision around boards is about encouraging 2 tiers of local government in New Zealand axing regional councils and axing the district and city councils. The axing of regional councils, which have a specific responsibility for natural resource management, the management of coast, air, water, will mean that there's less attention given to environmental management in local government. We're concerned by the attack on public participation, by the simplification of consultation requirements for a lot of local government activities. Yes, that may make consultation more flexible, but by making it more flexible, it may mean that councils have to be less thorough in ensuring that their communities get a say on their major decisions. And, for example, there's a proposal in the bill to change the purpose of long-term plans. They will no longer be to provide an opportunity for participation by the public in decision-making processes on activities to be undertaken by the local authority. Certainly those long-term plans can be complex, but actually putting them out for public submissions is a key part of the community saying what the council should be doing over the next 10 years. Thirdly, there's our concern about the privatisation thrust in the bill. In Clause 11, it becomes mandatory for local authorities after each election to review the cost-effectiveness of the council continuing to provide infrastructure, services and regulatory functions, and it requires the council to consider having a council-controlled organisation or some other person or agency, such as a private company, providing these services. This whole push to having more council-controlled organisations will make the management of our three waters, stormwater, wastewater and drinking water, much less transparent and much less accountable. And with this requirement to review, it will potentially force councils to consider privatising these services. The other issue we have a problem with is development contributions. And this is where we see this bill as being a charter for property developers, because of the way in which it restricts councils' use of development contributions by limiting the purpose for which they may be levied. Under the current Act, councils can levy development contributions to help fund reserves, network infrastructure or community infrastructure. And community infrastructure is defined very broadly. Yet the bill replaces that definition with a much more restrictive one, so that councils can only levy development contributions to fund community centres, community halls, play equipment and toilets. So National's definition of community infrastructure doesn't include libraries, cultural centres, swimming pools, skateboard parks, any of those things which help provide our community amenity. And so these changes, Mr Speaker, are quite consistent with this mean-spirited government which is not interested in fairness, which has economic policies which are increasing the divide between rich and poor, creating a much more unequal society and all of the social harm that goes with that. Educational underachievement, crime and social alienation. It fails to recognise that local government has a critical role in building social cohesion and building resilient communities by changes such as this one to community infrastructure. The only thing we are pleased about is we understand that the Minister is prepared to look at this definition of community infrastructure, but it needs to go back to what it is in the Principal Act, because we see developers as having a responsibility to help fund this, because it's their development which helps create the need for it. Not that it makes it too expensive, as the member for Christchurch Central is claiming. Last year, National showed that it didn't care about community wellbeing by stripping out the promotion of wellbeing from the Local Government Act. These changes around development contribution are with the same intention. And we also have a concern about this whole notion of objection process for development contributions. Again, it's the Minister who will appoint the panel or the Commissioner that hears the objection, not the Council. It will be a way of developers tying up councils, objecting to development contributions and paying their share of the costs of service provision. And finally, Mr Speaker, the other issue we have with the bill is this promotion of more use of council-controlled organisations, because the 2002 Act was very clear about safeguarding the provision of water supply, the three waters, in council ownership, in public ownership, and setting in place a number of checks and balances which this bill will seek to undermine.
I call Maggie Berry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak to the Local Government Act 2002 Amendment Bill number 3 in its first reading.